Over
I don't
just
think
the
it has
same
for
as
the
usual.
intro one. Right, we're going to go straight onto my team here. That's fine. Right, thank you so much, everybody that's here this evening. Sorry that you've obviously been waiting. Seb was making sure he looked his absolute best for all of us, and we do obviously appreciate that everybody's here and waited for us. So thank you so much. We have gone straight onto my score screen. There you go. You can look at it for a little bit longer. That's fine. But obviously, I'll tell you what we're doing tonight. Game week 3 is in the books. We are looking forward to game week 4 now. And finally, we've got a Monday night where we are not having to watch football while doing the stream, which is obviously fantastic as well. As always, you are joined by me, Andy, FPL Mode, and we are also joined by Seb. How's it going, Seb?
Evening, mate. It's going okay, thank you. A little bit rushed at the end there, but okay. I am tired in a good way, when like bank holiday day out all day. Um, so like happy tired, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And
Yeah.
obviously we were chasing Pokemon over the weekend as well. So
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of out and walking. But yeah, apologies, chat. We're late. We are late because I was finishing putting all these screens together. So there's a bunch of screens for you tonight, which hopefully are good, but it took a little longer than I had. So that is why we are a few minutes late. My
Exactly.
apologies.
You'll all appreciate it in the end, I promise. So, tonight then, as you can see, we are going to look at our points and how we got on this week. We have got our ranks on the screen now, so you can see those, both green arrows this week, which is fantastic. 337k for Seb, 837k for me, which I looked it up. I think it's 9 points. So nine
No,
points to the difference with 500k
massive.
places there. So it is very, very bunched up, as you can tell. We're going to be looking at our points. We're going to be looking at the overs and unders this week so far. So those players that are performing over expectations and those players that are performing under expectations. We're going to have a big thing about midfielders. Everybody wants midfielders at the moment. If we could, I'm pretty sure everybody would be playing, I don't know, 291 at the moment. No, that doesn't work. 191. Because midfielders are just all the buzz. So we're going to be looking at midfielders in a little bit more detail. And we're going to be picking out 3 or 4 players that we want to talk about in a little bit more detail and have a bit of a discussion about as well. Because for me, I might be making 2 midfielder moves this week. Then we're going to be looking a little bit at Man City. One of those midfielders in particular we'll be looking at, and his strike partner as well. We're going to be looking at our teams, going to be looking at the community team. We will do over or under with a fantastic new graphic as well from FPL Feral, so we'll be bringing that up too. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A. So it's going to go pretty quickly this week, I think. Now, for all those listening to the pod, I'm going to now change to my team screen, and here it is. So, my team scene, here we go. This is how I got on this week. 55 points. To be honest, I was actually pretty happy with this. I was pretty happy with my Chelsea boys returning on Friday night. No, I didn't have Sterling, and no, I didn't have Gusto. But the rest of it seemed okay. So, I had Pickford in goal. Yes, I still had Pickford. I had Chilwell, who got 6, Saliba 1, Estupinan 1, Martinelli 2, Rashford 7, Matoma 1, Saka 8, Bruno Fernandes with 12, Jackson, who I brought in this week for Pedro, which turned out to be a pretty good move, got 7. Haaland was my captain, who got me 8 points. So I had Colwill first on my bench, who got me 6. Shaw, who I didn't move out because I didn't want to yet, to be perfectly honest, got me 0 because obviously he's injured now long term, and Osula with 1. Turner with 3. I didn't realise Turner got 3. I just realised that. So even then, so every week I think I've got the rotation wrong. There you go. Yeah, very happy with this, to be perfectly honest. Kept Bruno and Rashford, returned me 19 points. I know quite a few people lost patience in those. I could have had a bigger haul from the Chelsea lads, but that's what it is. I think I was 1.6 million before this week, so I've half my rank. So yeah, we'll take it. And I got 2 free transfers going into this week, which I'm very, very happy about as well. So although I'm treading water and I haven't had one of those big jumps like a lot of people, I do feel like I am very well set up with 2 free transfers. I haven't been hit hard with injuries like some people have. Obviously, I've got Shaw, but actually, I'm probably going to be keeping Shaw this week anyway. So, yeah, I feel like I'm in a good place. Seb, you're in a slightly better place than me, and there's that certain 4 million defender that I said, Seb, do you regret that move? And obviously, you don't now.
No, that went all right, didn't it? Although there was another move that could have been very tasty. So my team is Edison. He finally got 2 points, returning to the mean, as is his way.
Yeah.
Chilwell with 6, Gusto with 14, which is lovely, and started as well. Didn't come on for Gabriel. That was a genuine start over Gabriel, who is still on my bench, only because needed to use my transfers elsewhere, so that's fine. And then Supernam brings that up as well with 1 point. I was thinking before I move on to the rest of the team, Is this for a lot of people the week where the Gabriel Saliba thing actually swings back
Yeah,
to even? Because some people who had Gabriel may well have now had Gabriel subbed out for example, Augusto, or I mean, probably not a Matty Cash unless you're very lucky, but something like that.
yeah.
All those points Saliba has got over the first couple of weeks ahead of Gabriel, people may now have won back because Gabriel didn't get any minutes. I'm not one of those people. So I think, to be fair, though, I've got Gusto. I may have made other moves, so I will very happily count that
I
as even.
I've got a feeling
I,
we won't hear about it as much though.
what do you mean?
If they've got those
Oh,
points
if
back
people,
now.
yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly happy that, like, it's evened out maybe very quickly, which is fine.
Yeah.
I would have played these same three players had I had Saliba. I'm pretty sure I would have benched him for Estupinan anyway, or at least I would have benched Estupinan for him. I would have always played the double Chelsea because I started with double Chelsea. That was the plan. So fair enough. Rashford with 7 and Bruno Fernandes with 12 in the midfield. Lovely that they came good after, I think, last week we tried to urge people not to sell them. So nice that they returned some points. I mean, obviously, Forest at home. Saka took a penalty, which is interesting as well. After
Yeah.
Odegaard didn't last week, last week, and Saka took one this week, which is, I think, fair to say they're probably just about Saka's, but clearly he can give them away sometimes. Havertz, who is giving away, I don't know, all of my points. And Mbeumo, who finally didn't score a penalty. Jackson up front, who was my transfer, got rid of Mbama and brought in Jackson using about 2.9 of my 3 million or something. Haaland captain, as with everyone else, got a goal, missed a penalty. Doesn't matter when he's 90% owned and everyone captains him.
Yeah.
And the bench, the only really interesting thing there, I guess, is João Pedro, who remains in my team mostly just because I had one transfer rather than two because of all the Saliba, James, blah, blah, blah nonsense. So I opted to do Mbama to Jackson rather than Havertz to Sterling, which was, we chatted. I mean, everyone has this story, don't they? So again, you complain for 3 seconds, then you move on. But I was very close to doing Havertz to Sterling. The reason it would have been great this week. The reason I didn't is I think my team is nicer going forward if I have Jackson and Haaland up front and then can move Havertz to, say, a non-Chelsea midfielder, for example, say a Foden or something. I think it makes more sense for how I want to play my team into the wild card. But right now, I'd take those 19 points and a worse structure for sure. But I didn't do that, so we move on.
And I bet there's a lot of people out there going, "No, you didn't. Of course, you almost did it." No, we've got our little Scoutcast group chat going, and you were like, "Oh, I think I might get Sterling. I think I might get Sterling."
I'm normally good for those as well. Like it was similar to the. I mean, I don't want to mention Wilson too many times this year because it was last year and we've done it enough. Don't want to become Andy Martin. Love you, Andy. But yeah, it's similar to like the Wilson one, and to be fair, and the Foden one that went badly for me last Christmas. Normally, when I'm at a point where I'm like, oh, Andy Jack and Andy Rich, I'm thinking I'll do this thing like 5 minutes before deadline. I normally do. Didn't follow it through, so I deserve no credit.
Yeah. After one goal, you were like, it happens. After two, you were like, oh no, I regret this
Whoopsie.
now.
Whoopsie.
But it happens, doesn't it? It happens. And actually, you got Jackson in. Jackson scored a goal. You're well set up moving forward. It's fine. Yeah. And we're going to talk a lot about midfielders tonight anyway. Before I move on to going on to our over and under stats, all of the stats you see here tonight are from the members area with Scout. So make sure if you're not a member yet, go on there. The members area is brilliant, and all the stats you see from here, the overs, the unders, and a lot of our decision making comes from that as well. So do make sure if you're not a member already, you sign up. And while I'm plugging at the moment, make sure you like the stream as well, because that would really, really help us. And just forget about us being late. Forget about that. Right, so let's have a look at the overperformers so far. And actually, there is starting to get a little bit of a pattern, even after 3 weeks here. There seems to be getting the same players that are on it. Obviously, they will be because they were high overperformance in the first 2 weeks anyway, and we're just adding on to that. But if anything, they are adding on to what they've already done. And Ward-Prowse is high up on this list. I've got a feeling he's going to be high up on this list most of the season, to be perfectly honest. A lot of people are looking at West Ham assets, Seb, because they've got Luton next. And I feel like a lot of people are going to be looking at assets from the team that are playing Luton every week. They've got Luton next. Ward-Prowse is there. A lot of people fancy Bowen. Just quickly, because obviously I've got the rest of the list to go through, but Ward-Prowse is there right at the top. Do you fancy Ward-Prowse as a player?
I'm sure he's a very lovely man. I'd go Bowen.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're looking, and I think like targeting Luton is a fair thing. Or they're looking at their fixtures. As soon as like Sterling had scored his second, I remember thinking like, who do Luton play every week? Because
Yeah, I
they
know.
were bad. And actually, their fixtures are really nice. It's actually a bit annoying that they don't have like players we're gonna naturally have.
And also, I do wonder because this is their first home game coming up now, isn't it? And I'm wondering
Yes.
whether newly promoted team at home is it going to be what we expect it to be? I don't know.
I mean, I'm hesitant to like judge too quickly because we know how this goes, but they don't. I mean, I don't think anyone thought they were a Premier League team at the beginning of the summer, and I don't know if they've turned into one by the end of the summer.
Yeah,
Their championship season was remarkable. They did brilliant, but they scored off the top of my head, was it like 50 goals or something like stupidly small
yeah,
in 46 matches? It was obviously based on a solid defense, that low block, and a great plan and a bit of luck probably. But coming into the Premier League, like they really have to up that defensive game if that's how they're going to survive in the Premier League. And I think based on what we saw against Chelsea, Chelsea have been fine. Like, we'll talk about Sterling a bit later. But it was one of the few matches this weekend I watched. And watching it, I guess, adding the context to when you look at the numbers, Chelsea messed up so many attacks before the numbers ever would have shown up, like, chances created or shots or anything. They were just falling over balls all over the place. Luton, whenever the play broke down, were just so open for Jackson and Sterling to run through the lines that if they don't sort that out, you'd be fair enough targeting them, I think, going forward.
yeah, yeah. I do think we're starting to see those teams that are really open and really kind of letting teams attack them. But obviously that can change. This is only 3 weeks in, and I think someone said today, you never judge a league table until Christmas. But there are teams like Luton where you're thinking, oh yeah, but they might be struggling anyway.
Yeah.
The rest of this table, by the way, so we've got Ward-Prowse at the top, Rodri's next, then Diaby, Aurea, Gusto, Estupinan, Awunyi, Nunes, March, and Enciso. Three Brighton lads there, all overperforming at the moment. Fixtures turn a little bit now, Seb. If you are on, for instance, a Matoma or a Pedro or even a Stupinan, would you be looking to maybe use this time to move on? Because a lot of people got these Brighton lads thinking 3 weeks in, going to ditch them after that. Has anything changed?
It's funny, isn't it? Like, was it only a week ago Estupinan was returning, mid-teens in terms of points, and we're all talking about, oh well, we'll hold them through because yeah, sure, I might not play them, but great player, I don't want to lose price rises. I'd imagine now we go back the other way and we go, oh no, they just conceded a bunch of goals to a team I thought they probably wouldn't. Maybe I can sell them. The truth is in the middle, I suspect, right? Like I think a lot of people plan to sell most, if not all, their Brighton players. If you've got a midfielder and a forward, so probably João Pedro, probably Mitoma, then I think they're easier sells because there's a lot of good midfielders and some good forwards as well. Someone like a Stupinan maybe can go sit on your bench because defender transfers aren't as sexy and there's maybe fewer attractive defenders over this period. So I think benching is fine. And yeah, not wanting to lose the zero point 0.1 you will have like actually banked in terms of real value here is kind of fair enough. If you have to go and buy him back at 5.3 when you paid 5 or hell, say they go and keep a clean sheet and score a goal next week and it's 5.4, that could hurt a little bit. So I'd understand holding on to him. But I think if you had set up to sell, for example, say to Trippier, and then you're wildcarding in game 8 or 9, I do think you stick with that plan. You reckon,
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, I like the Estupinan. I think you can stick with him at least for the next couple of weeks because he's just so far forward and his heat maps are just ridiculous. But with someone like Matoma, I feel like you can kind of move off them. Because I've got Matoma and I'm thinking about moving off them just because I think he's going to struggle so much to keep up with the players like Mbeumo, Maddison, Sterling. I just don't see him potentially doing it. You're having trouble there.
I have not managed to drink that bottle of water.
It's tough.
That's
Man.
not how you do that.
No.
That's not how you do that at all.
And I do see him struggling to keep up with them, if that makes sense. And I think, especially now that their fixtures maybe get a bit trickier. Yes, they do have Bournemouth in game week 6, but when you've got players like Mbeumo, Foden, Maddison, even Eze, who do have nice fixtures coming up, I think it's kind of natural that you do move off them potentially. And Pedro for me is a sell anyway. I think you worked it out today. I think he's averaging 50 minutes a game at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, almost exactly. Which I think is all right, but probably not what you want anymore with harder fixtures. Right?
Yeah.
A decent gamble to start the season. I took it, and I think I fell a bit short. I think I predicted about 60 in terms of averaging over the few. But again, it depends how that comes because you could average 60 minutes with no starts. That would obviously be ridiculous. It's the starts we want.
Yeah.
One start, two benchings, but half an hour off the bench each time. It's all right, but maybe would want a bit better, and it will maybe be my transfer this week. Although actually, it probably won't. But it'll be a benching maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. Moving on, we won't talk about him for very long, but people are starting to talk about Rodri. And the fact
don't do it. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Maybe they could get him in because he started the season so well. He was 5.5 to start. He's now 5.7. He's got a return almost every week so far. With the lack of other midfielders at City, is it just that we go for Rodri?
Yeah, Foden will miss control across every week, and Rodri will arrive in the area to smash it in the top corner with his left foot.
Good finish. It's a good finish.
It's a great finish. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's his thing, right? He's decent at those like long shots, especially those low driven ones you see. But nah.
I know.
Nah.
But I'm genuinely getting questions every day on Twitter going, what about Rodri? Why not we go Rodri?
I mean, obviously Enzo's a very different player, but a similar sort of question in terms of like, oh, should we go Enzo? Well, if he's got penalties, then that is very different. But the reason I raise Enzo is like, it's not like maybe all season there's a nailed Chelsea striker, like a Haaland, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's a nailed defender or goalkeeper that you must have, although I know, James Chilwell might be taking that mantle. And so then our only real spot for City is one more spot outside of defence and Haaland.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to spend that on Rodri over like Foden or Alvarez or De Bruyne later in the season? I don't know, man.
People that did.
Double defense is probably if you're just after those minutes, double defense.
Yeah. Before we move off the overs, your man came up clutch for Liverpool, didn't he?
He's on this.
Came on, got 2 goals. He's on this list.
Darwin is overperforming. He's overperforming his XG. I think the world might be about to end.
So Darwin Núñez from game week 8 and 9. If he's getting some minutes, and I mean they looked explosive with him on the pitch.
It's minutes though, isn't it? I would love, I would love to, and I would love to try and convince other people so that they could join me in my pain. But it's minutes. You can't be going there without an assurance of minutes. And scoring 2 goals off the bench is nice. I don't think that proves anything in terms of him starting consistently.
Yeah, honestly, there are times where there's certain players that I think about when there's certain people I think about when I think of players. Whenever I hear Sterling, I think of Flapjack. He loves him, and he loves Salah as well. Whenever I think of Núñez now, I mean, it's Sebastian Núñez. That is literally who I think about now.
Good name.
Yeah, exactly.
But can I just mention as well, by the way, I think we have FPL Fran in the chat who did do the Sterling move and also owned Gusto. So fair play. You are the person I wish I was. You are tall, handsome, smart, and good at FPL.
Exactly. Right. Well done, mate. That was fantastic. It was lovely seeing that on the timeline as well. So looking at the underperformers now, which is usually the kind of, they're not quite doing it yet, but we're expecting them to. And Bruno and Rashford were obviously on this list last week. Bruno is still on this list. He's second. Enzo Fernandez is top. I'm assuming because he missed that penalty, didn't really help. Bruno Fernandes second. Then Eze. Cunha for Wolves is fourth. Mope's going to be on this list all year, so I'm almost tempted to just ignore him now. Jackson is on this list too. Anthony, Saka, Decore, and then Havertz. I won't talk about the United lads too much because we've seen they've had an interesting start, but obviously Bruno Fernandes did return this week, which was lovely. Eze's on that list though. He's got some lovely fixtures coming up. What's your take on Eze at the moment? Because I look at him and think he's a fantastic player. He's basically Zaha now, isn't he? He's a fantastic player in a team that isn't very good at attacking. And it seems to be that he looks good and he's getting the underlyings, but getting returns is going to be tricky for him.
I guess like Zaha in terms of FPL pedigree, obviously very, very different, very, very different player.
Oh yeah,
but if you want to go to Palace, sure. If you want to go to Palace, you're like immediately attracted to Eze, as opposed to in the past it may have been Zaha was the poster person for Palace. Yeah, reasonable. I agree with you with good fixtures. I think the only reason Moore didn't start at the beginning of the season was fixtures and a plethora of other options in midfield. But definitely on my list for a Havertz replacement. And very much so because having now spent basically all of my 3 mil in the bank to do Mbeumo to Jackson, if I want to be getting, say, Trippier at some point, I probably need to do Havertz down, not up. So, and then I've got João Pedro to move down maybe as well, but that's another transfer later on. So someone like Eze, who's a little bit cheaper, but putting up numbers in 3 weeks or whatever, but similar to some more expensive assets is pretty attractive to me. And an underperformer, I'm a sucker for an underperformer. Apart from Neil Morpay, that's not underperforming. That's just him performing.
Yeah, exactly. Jackson's another one as well. Obviously, a lot of people jumped on Jackson last week. Got a goal. I'm not going to lie. I watched the first half and I was thinking, what have I done here? Because he looked like he really struggled. Second half, he did come into it a bit more. I mean, we were messaging, weren't we? And I was going, we're not getting
Man, you
anything here,
got me as
lads.
well because I thought he'd been like it was that classic, obviously like not sorry, I was distracted by a comment in the chat. Yes, I am very short. Um yeah, fair enough. Well, it was one of those performances where like just watching aesthetically him basically miscontrol stuff, under hit passes and like run and then fall over, you'd go, what an absolute joke of a player. But I think both FPL and real life align nicely here because it's not like he was just invisible or missing or in the wrong position or
Hmm.
whatever. He was massively involved.
Yeah,
And sure, if he fell over when he tried to turn, he was turning just outside the edge of the area where if he kept his feet, he drives into the area. Stuff like that encourages me.
yeah,
Okay, if he falls over all season, then you go, okay, brilliant. He just isn't, he isn't being used correctly because he can't pull off the things he's trying to do. But one match where maybe he's just not quite clicking, but very, very close. That reminds me of basically every striker in the past in FPL that we want before other people. If they score goals straight away, then there's no edge there. Darwin last year didn't come good for me, but Jackson reminds me of that. Bright
oh
positions,
god,
numbers,
oh god.
looking like he can make stuff happen, involved. I'm very happy to win.
Yeah, Sebastian Jackson. I like it. No, I do completely agree with you. And I think I can remember a manager saying this years ago, saying that you don't mind if your striker misses chances, as if they're not getting the chances that you've got to worry. And he
Yeah,
is getting the
exactly.
chances.
Exactly.
And that team's got, it's going to be in a bit of a transition this year because they basically changed their whole squad again. But I think he's still a good pick. But my question this week for you with Jackson, and I know we're going to come on to Sterling a little bit later anyway. But if you didn't make that move last week, and now you don't have Sterling and you don't have Jackson, they're both pretty much the same price. Jackson's 7.1. I think Sterling's still 7 at the moment.
No, I think
Or did
Sterling
he
did go
move
up.
up as
Yeah,
well?
I think so. Yeah,
So they're
it's
exact same
basically one of the
price.
reasons Rich did him, isn't it?
Which one would you go with now? Knowing this week's data where Sterling I've had an absolute haul, which one would you go with now?
So I think like there's a reason a few people were already, I say a few people, basically Fran, going Sterling because he was looking decent in those first few weeks, maybe just not quite turning it into FPL relevant stuff yet. So I don't think him performing brilliantly against the worst team he'll play all season at home, so the easiest fixture all year probably, is as big a surprise as it could have been, see, in other circumstances. But I also don't think anyone predicted 2 goals and an assist. So the reason I say that is if the plan was always Jackson, for example, I don't think Sterling has done enough to necessarily mean you rip up your plans.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were undecided, then that's maybe where Sterling has edged it for you. For me, I've obviously already gone Jackson. And so I can't. I've got Gusto and Joel as well, so I can't go and like backtrack and go Sterling. And I think my team structure is better without Sterling, or at least that's what I'm telling myself to get to sleep at night. But there'll be other people who obviously are better set up to have Sterling, for example. Say if someone has Haaland and Alvarez, I guess you've probably removed Foden from the equation for yourself,
Yeah.
and so your available spot is more likely a midfielder. So Sterling, absolutely fair enough. But the important thing to say, and of course this goes for Jackson too, they've just maybe had the easiest fixture they will have all season. Of course, they can gel more, they can play better as a
Mm-hmm.
team. So later in the season, they may put in a better performance, but they can't play Luton at home again. So we want to be careful about chasing what, in theory, was the best fixture they're going to have all year.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well, like it's not like you're taking a massive gamble going with these players at the moment. They're 7.1 million. Like you're actually downgrading one of your midfielders to get to like a Sterling, for instance. So it doesn't feel like it was a gamble. Like someone like Bruno Fernandes, 8.5. You think, oh right, how do I need to change my team around to fit someone like that in? And then does it become a gamble? Someone like Sterling, like I said, people are maybe moving off of someone like Martinelli to get to Sterling. It doesn't seem like a gamble at the moment. Don't get me wrong, it could not work out. Of course it can, because everything can not work out. But it just seems like it doesn't seem as much of a gamble as it could be at just 7.1 million.
No. And I mean, hey, look, if he's a 200-point player for Man City a few years ago,
For
if
Man
he gets
City.
anywhere near that again, 7.1 is outrageous. grab that immediately.
Yeah.
We know we're probably about 4 or 5 weeks away from wildcard, most of us. So again, for me, for example, I'm Chilwell, Gusto, and Jackson. If James is back fit, I've got to reverse the Gusto move at some point. So I haven't got Sterling for a few weeks. But when I wildcard, I will certainly, with a bit more information to play with as well, which is nice, I will certainly be looking at Sterling as part of a Chelsea defender, Chelsea midfielder type idea, I think, depending on how the fixtures look.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Right, let's move on to midfielders then, because this is all the talk at the moment, and there are a lot of people that are starting a wild card now as well, and starting to say either I've not started the way I wanted, my team's not where I want it to be on wildcarding, or they looked at this time and said, yep, this is when I wanted to wildcard anyway. So a lot of people are wildcarding. I haven't seen many 4-4-2s. I haven't seen many 4-3-3s or 3-4-3s. It's all about those 5 midfielders at the moment, and everybody wants them. And Seb, what I want before we finish today is for us to say, if we were on a wild card, these are the 5 midfielders I would be picking. So who are the best 5 midfielders to own at the moment? So we're going to use their stats so far, and obviously we're going to think about their fixtures too. We've got the stats up here at the moment, which is based on their XGI so far this season, isn't it?
Yeah, this is all this season so far.
Lovely stuff. So Bruno Fernandes is top. Then it's Mbeumo. Then Harvey Barnes, which is quite interesting. Then we've got Saka, Maddison, Bailey is in there. Salah, Mitoma, Diaz, Bowen, Foden, Enzo. This is all going in order at the moment based on their XGI so far this season. Then we've got, so it carries on going, March, Ward-Prowse, Eze, Rashford, Diogo Jota, Sterling, Diaby, Odegaard, Grealish, Havertz, Son, and Martinelli right at the end there. Now, straight away I'm looking at some of these players and I'm thinking Bruno Fernandes, quite a few people own, but they've got a tough fixture this week. If you were wildcarding this week, would Bruno be in your team?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Based on his involvement so far and on pens.
Yeah, I mean, not even. So obviously these are numbers, as you said, from the first 3 weeks so far, which is far too little data, but we can be reassured by this is mostly a familiar list and not far off a familiar order for most of them as well, right? Of course, someone like Bruno isn't going to keep up 1.3 XGI per 90. This is for the whole season. We expect that to, well, maybe even half, right? Get right down to 0.7, 0.8, which would still be brilliant, maybe 0.9, whatever. But I think there's nothing too surprising on here generally, so we can carry this forward with us. You'd want to go and look at last season too. Of course, you'd want to look at anyone who's had tactics change. So we've discussed Arsenal a lot already. You mentioned Martinelli there. Pretty disappointed with Martinelli, to be honest. The whole left side has not looked good, which does involve Havertz. It does obviously involve the idea that once again, Zinchenko didn't play, Gabriel didn't play. They went with Kiva out there and the same inversion from the right. So whether that is now just a tactical choice that will mean that Gabriel sits, or if it's because Zinchenko wasn't ready, but Gabriel will still sit. Havertz has obviously changed the build up there a bit. Speaking to Arsenal fans, ones that I think are sort of relatively level-headed don't think Havertz has been bad, even they think he's been quite good. But for FPL, he's obviously not put up much. So I don't think we need to worry about him much going forwards. And then Arsenal as a team, they clearly need to work into this sort of new build-up patterns and whatnot, the new construction down the left especially, or go back to what they were doing before. But other than that, and say Chelsea as well, I think it's pretty familiar. Son spent most of last season down there. He's still down there. He's very, very wide on the left. But what we've done, because this is 24 players, if I counted while I was talking there very quickly.
Yeah.
That's too many, fully, to digest. So we've pulled out a few, which was you, Andy. You named the list.
I did.
So we've pulled out a few players to look at in a bit more detail. The one thing I really want to emphasize, and the reason we put this up first, is that just because we're looking at, I think, 4 or 5 players here, that doesn't mean we're saying get these players or don't get these players. They're just some that we think are interesting to discuss based on what's happened so far, what might be to come in the future, especially with fixtures. But this probably is the list you want to go back to. This is 24 midfield options from which you can select your favorite 5 or 1 if you don't have a wildcard.
Yeah. And the first one we brought up is Maddison. So Maddison was on that list that we just showed you. His stats so far this season have been good. He's playing for a team that are playing good attacking football, actually, and they play quite consistently. You're expecting them to play that style of play quite consistently, which is always good in terms of will he replicate the data we're seeing so far. He seems integral to that team, and he seems to be on everything as well, which is lovely to see as well. He is a player that I am looking at and I really want. And there's not many players in a season where I look at him and go, oh, I really want him. And I've watched him the last 3 weeks and gone, oh, I really want him. And you brought up you set us up here kind of a heat map from last season at Leicester and this season so far at Spurs, haven't you? And the kind of areas he's operating in.
Yeah. So firstly, to say I'm with you. Like, if I'm going to cry myself to sleep about not having Sterling, hopefully Maddison will wake me up with a joy in the morning. Let's
What?
let's move on from that analogy.
Hang on, no, say that
Um,
again, but slower.
no. So yeah, no. Hopefully, if I do go for someone like Maddison or whatever, that justifies the not getting Sterling, because obviously I've got my Chelsea striker up front now, and Alvarez is an interesting one for João Pedro, as we'll talk about later. But Maddison. So the first thing to point out with what you're seeing here on the video and the graphics is that right hand side 22-23 is obviously a lot hotter than the left hand side. That's because he played 30 odd matches on the right and he hasn't so far on the left. So obviously, please don't look at that whole thing and think, oh my goodness, he's hardly involved. It's sort of the pattern we're looking to look at rather than necessarily the sort of density of that pattern. And actually, what I think is super interesting is if I didn't tell you the left hand side was Spurs and I just told you it was Maddison playing for Leicester again in the first couple of matches of this season, you'd believe me, with one exception, and that's he isn't going right, he's going left.
Yeah.
Now, of course, on the right hand side, he goes left plenty as well, but he very clearly stops. There's that sort of like quite nice line outside the box, which replicates, when you see those pass maps where teams obviously pass, or like around the box, across the box, down the channels, down the side. And then what you want to see is some like nice ones that cut into the box, but it always makes this pattern where it just looks like you never pass into the box because obviously that's what the other team defend. Maddison heat map almost looks the same because I guess he's the player making those passes. He gets the touches outside the back, down the channels, trying to look to go into the box. So you get this nice little line that just cuts him off from the box, obviously with a few entries, which you would expect. But then down the left, it jumps a bit. And I was wondering, complete speculation, someone like Harvey Barnes or something like that. Maybe that's because that's where Harvey Barnes is occupying, sort of coming inside. So Maddison isn't taking that space. Whereas for Spurs, with him maybe coming left a bit here, I know we've got Son out there, but Kulusevski comes inside from the right a lot more. It looks like Son's been asked to stay wide, really wide. The goal this weekend, I think Maddison's goal came from Son first out wide and then bringing it back across. So maybe Maddison is now coming out to this left. But with not quite enough data to draw a firm conclusion, it's looking a lot like he is very involved in the same way he was for Leicester, although with a few obviously tactical differences. And we can't just say that from a heat map, which is why we've obviously got some numbers at the top as well. This is just a bit more detail from the previous page on his season so far. Some encouraging numbers. Obviously, I was going to say a very slight overperformance, actually. Don't think it is. He's basically bang on, so that's very encouraging.
Yeah.
If he continues that, you would say there's a bit of signal there. 3 weeks again, of course. If he took a penalty, he becomes
I know,
like Fernandez level of useful, right?
Yeah, big time. And I mean, for me, I would want to own Maddison over Bruno Fernandes if he was on penalties, because I don't necessarily trust. I don't necessarily trust that Bruno. I love Bruno, by the way, and he's great at creating. He's just like Maddison in that. But am I expecting Maddison to get as many bookings? I'm not. Am I expecting the exact style of play I'm expecting from United every single week? No. Whereas I feel like with Spurs, we're going to see that most weeks. So I just feel like I'm going to get more consistency out of Maddison. The only thing I will say about him is, whenever he's been like this, whenever he's done it with Leicester, you have to jump on him early, because he'll either get injured or he's a streaky player and he'll go a little bit quiet for a bit. And I feel like this is his hot streak starting already. I'm edging towards maybe not getting him this week because he's got Burnley away, which isn't an awful fixture, but there's two others that have nicer fixtures. And I'm just wondering whether that might be a mistake.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think this is going to come down to fixtures, isn't it? There are. Well, we had 24 midfielders there who were just like the top 24 for XGI in terms of the ones that we thought were interesting as well. We cherry picked that list, so you can't have all of them. You can't even have a quarter of them. So you do have to choose, and I think we're going to have to do that based on fixtures. If Maddison got penalties, that's why then you start going, well, do I just hold for a long time? Yeah. But I don't think he has penalties. No, his penalty record is all right, I think, off the top of my head. But I don't know if he's ever been long-term first choice. Son obviously used to take them when Kane wasn't there. There's no reason Son wouldn't keep taking them, especially with the captain's armband, I believe. Yeah, he's less involved in outfield play. Doesn't mean he wouldn't take a penalty. The one thing that is nice with Maddison, though, and we did see a bit of this at Leicester, where he would, when he was playing centrally, especially rather than when he was put out on the right so much. Again, looking at those maps, we can see he's obviously playing right because sometimes he started out there but came inside. He is still getting beyond the striker, the Richarlison in this shape.
Striker.
Obviously, Harry Kane. Yeah, well, I mean, his hold up's been all right and stuff, but yeah, you're right. Maybe that's why he's getting beyond him. But we saw him do that for Leicester. He was often the furthest forward, often off the ball, so he wouldn't show up on a heat map. But that's great because if he's making those runs off the ball, getting there, sometimes the ball will find him. If he's doing that again for Tottenham, the goal threat is lovely alongside the assist threat.
Mhm.
I kinda, because in pre-season I remember saying like I didn't want him because I thought Kane or Son would be the main people in that team. Clearly I was wrong there. It's kind of a shame Kane's left because that Maddison
I know.
Kane partnership, a bit like Kane Son, but Maddison a lot cheaper, would have been amazing. I wonder
Yeah.
if do you reckon when Maddison was like over the summer talking to Tottenham, do you reckon he knew Kane was leaving? Or do you think he was told like you're going to play with Harry Kane?
Probably, yeah. It's
Yeah,
probably a big selling
harsh.
point as well.
Yeah,
But I mean, like you just said there, I love the fact that actually with Kane it would have been brilliant because you would have had that person that was getting the returns and he was obviously linking up with. But I do think because Kane used to drop deep and provide that creativity as well, Maddison's kind of taking that on, if that makes sense. And I like
yeah.
that, if that makes sense. Like that team needs him to be that player, and the fact he's on all the set pieces as well. Like I just really want to know from you if you were making a transfer this week and you didn't have lots of these midfielders we've already spoken about, would Maddison be top of the list for you? Would he be, yeah, he's a player I want. I want him in as soon as possible.
I mean, he's on the list for the transfer I might make this week. So yeah, I don't know if he's
Ooh.
number one.
You are not allowed to say this about every midfielder because we got three more to talk about here. Right.
Well, I own a couple of them, and there's actually one that I think I'm not getting. So
Ooh. Right. Next up is Mbeumo. For me, I am looking at him this week and saying with that fixture against Bournemouth at home and the fact he is the only midfielder that we're going to talk about that's on penalties, I feel like he's a priority in. I feel like he's done well already this season. I know I've streamed with Margaret and he's not that convinced. He thinks he's kind of overperforming. We've looked at he's potentially overperforming, but he's on penalties, which helps. We've got his heat maps up from last season and from this season, and we've got his stats as well. Talk us through what you think about Mbeumo because neither of us own him, do we?
I own Mbeumo.
Oh, you do own Mbeumo.
Yeah,
Sorry.
penalties and minutes, my friend.
Yeah, of course.
I was just trying to look at the numbers there to see if he is overperforming. So goals 1, XG 1.1 per 90, I think that is. And then assists we have what 0.7, 0 assists. So actually, is he by that he's underperforming, but it massively helps that he's taken a penalty and
Two
missed a
penalties.
sitter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean like, oh yeah, two penalties. Good point. Oh yeah, fair. So like if Mark is saying, obviously when Mark says he's overperforming, I don't think he means by the numbers.
No, no, no,
Obviously, that's
no.
what I heard. I think from the numbers you can't draw a conclusion. There's not enough. So yeah, fair enough. If you took those penalties out, would you go? He's missed a sitter, scored one, meh. But that's the thing. We can't take the penalties out. I'm a big fan. It's lucky that we've had two penalties so far. It'd be entirely fair if he went 6 to 8 weeks without a penalty now. The reason I put up these maps, and we don't have this for every player, it's similar to the Maddison one though, is just to very quickly look, and maybe this is just me, with Tony out the side. Was there an argument for like him being more central, either literally or figuratively speaking, to Brentford's play in terms of him maybe taking up that main striker role? I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
Obviously, watching them play is one of the ways you'd want to work this out, but I can't show you video here. So we have a heat map for you. 2022-23 on the right, 23-24 on the left, same as with Maddison's one, and it looks extremely similar. Obviously, again, the density isn't there; it'll build up over the season, but he's looking like the right winger half the time, a bit of a striker sometime. They kind of play the two up front, but he drops Visser maybe being the main focal point there, or at least in terms of where the touches will come. So yeah, I think we are relying on the same sort of open play goal threat as last year, which was fine. But penalties, that's the big
Yeah.
thing. And minutes as well. I think he's got 90 in all the matches so far. Whereas last year he was getting subbed off. But now, because they don't have Tony to remain on the pitch, maybe Mbeumo is the one who's getting those minutes, even if it's not that central location. So while I wouldn't necessarily agree with you in terms of you must get him now, if you don't have him, you probably need him at some point. But I think unlike someone like, I don't know, unlike say a Sterling who you might feel desperate for, or like even maybe Maddison or whoever, who we feel maybe could make a really big impact in, say, their next match.
Yeah.
And Mbeumo feels more like just at some point this season, you need to be owning him for most of it while he's fit and while it makes sense. But I don't know if any week he's ever top of the list. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
See, I'm being bullish. I'm saying he's top of the
I'll
list this
go
week.
for it.
I've been looking at it because I'm, like I said, most probably going to make 2 transfers this week, and it will be 2 midfielders most likely as well. And I just feel like I need Mbeumo. I feel like this week, home to Bournemouth, on penalties, I don't see a world in where if I'm going to make 2 transfers in midfield, I don't bring him in. That doesn't mean I think he is the best long-term play. I'm thinking in terms of getting him in this week and then having him for the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, whatever it is. I feel like
sure.
he is pretty high up on my list, and he's a lot like Maddison in terms of he seems to be quite talismanic for that team, and he's on a lot of stuff as well. And like you said, he's got the minutes and he's got the penalties. There's nothing to really not like about him. Don't get me wrong. You're looking at his return so far this season. Like you said, he's had a tap in and he's had 2 penalties. But you've got to be there for the tap in.
Oh, tap ins are the best. That's XG,
Exactly.
big XG. Get in the right place. I will take a player that gets chances over a player who can finish chances if they're bad at the opposite of that every single time. And obviously that's not provable in reality because a player who can't get chances, well, isn't ever there to finish them anyway. But XG is obviously a measure more of if you're in the right place to score a goal or if you're getting good chances over if you can finish them. We can work that out with, with goals versus XG. And I think, as you can tell from the numbers I often put forward here, that I will always favour a player who is getting in the position to score over someone who is scoring but isn't looking like continuing to get into position.
Yeah. And now, so I'm going to do this each time. We've had Maddison, we've had Mbeumo. Rank them 1 and 2. Who would you bring in this week?
Well, I already own Mbeumo, and I didn't start with Maddison, so there's my answer. I chose Mbeumo. I had the choice. I chose Mbeumo, and I think I might still. I think you're right in terms of it feels like something. I don't want to be too passionate on it because I'm wary. I'm wary. I'm wary of like telling someone.
But I'm wary.
I'm wary of telling someone to like rip up their team. You must get Mbeumo when it doesn't feel like that. But at some point, it needs to be in your midfield because good value, good points potential,
and he potentially is going to be going up in price. Look, he's worth 7.5, 8 million because he's on penalties and he's playing in a good team. I don't think you need to bother worrying about getting in early before he goes up again. Like he's going to be worth the price if he goes up 0.1 before the end of the week. So.
I forget which league it is, but one of the top 60 something or Elite 64 or Analytics 64, whichever one it is, I think he was the only player outside of Haaland who was 100% owned. And I think that probably tells you everything you need to know.
That's why I'm not in that league.
So it's not that one then.
No. Right. Moving on to Sterling now. So this is obviously he had an absolute haul in his last game. Was it 19 points I think he got in the end?
Yeah.
2 goals and assist. Some people were thinking about getting him but didn't get him. He that was against you, Seb, sorry. Look, we started the season. People were saying, look, maybe you could think about Sterling. I was quite happy to say I was nowhere near getting someone like Sterling. Had no idea how Chelsea were going to play. There were some players like Jackson I was quite interested in, Chilwell, all the wing backs we were. But Sterling feels like he's come out of nowhere. He has just had that game against Luton, which you've just alluded to is basically the easiest fixture they're going to have all year. But if you look at the heat maps here, he's the furthest one forward. He's getting in the box quite routinely as well. And actually, the first 2 games, he looked quite good as well. So, are you looking to get Sterling in?
So,
you can't.
You mentioned,
can you? But
no, I can't. But I absolutely would be looking at it. Like, absolutely. I've considered like what my team would look like if I'd gone Sterling instead of Jackson, or if I'd rolled. A lot of people who I respect as FPL managers rolled, didn't make a transfer. Now they do have that choice to make, and I suspect they may be going Sterling, and I reckon I'll be jealous because, well, he'll get more points for goals. If nothing else, if him and Jackson are just as threatening as each other, and against Luton, they often look like a front 2 in terms of where they were getting in the offensive phases, Sterling will get more points for what he's doing. We have maps up here, which you mentioned. The one on the left this time is just versus Luton. This is from SofaScore. This is one of the few things here that isn't from the Scout members area. Pretty much all of the rest of this is from the Scout members area. We have the stats tables are from the members area. You can build your own, which we have done for over under, or you can just go look at some, some big ones and filter through the data. There's also the heat maps, which are on the players' profiles. You can see those for matches as well. The only reason I've gone Super Score here is just because I could show you the team shape and Sterling's map on the same pitch here. So you can see there's Chelsea's shape. There's that back three. Chilwell basically playing as left winger again. Gusto exactly where James would have been. It's the shape we know they've played every single match. Very familiar. Sterling sitting in the similar sort of place as he has done so far in terms of the average position, which is his little number 7 in the circle. That's his average position. The one thing that's been different against Luton that wasn't really present in the other two matches, at least so much, is those massive touches in the area. And I think, obviously, one of those, we have to be careful with, single match things because, his goal, he sort of dribbled from wide right through the area, quite close to goal, finished it lovely far post. For all I know, depending on how, this map counts the data, that big red hotspot is basically that one dribble because he if it's not passes received, but it's literally touches of the ball, well, he had about 5 or 6 there. So maybe that's all of that. But there is also a couple outside of the area. You can see him getting, central and forward. And I think that goes back to when we were talking about Luton in terms of they were so open for him and Jackson just taking the ball and carrying straight through the channels between their centre back and fullback or between their centre backs. And that's what we're seeing Sterling do here. On the right hand side, we have 22-23 again, like the other ones. I actually expected when I was looking at this earlier for it to look really different. It kind of, and again, the Luton one is just the Luton match on the left-hand side, but the rest of his season looks similar so far. It's only 2 matches, but without the touches in the area. It looks really similar. So maybe this is a good argument for not just picking players based on heat maps, which I don't think anyone does. That would be insanity. But obviously, it's what you're doing, once you've got those touches or what else you're doing in terms of releasing the ball from those positions. But we see here on the right-hand side when he's playing right, he's playing left. He's obviously sort of sticking wide, but coming inside a fair bit. I recall hearing in the week that Sterling had mentioned to Poch, whether this is true or not, I'm not sure, but I will report it as I heard it, that he'd asked to be allowed to go wide a bit more. So as opposed to, say, forming a front two or playing behind a striker or anything like that, because he wanted the space to be able to express himself more as a player. It's where he felt he was better. That doesn't mean, of course, he won't come inside. We've had that argument with Salah for 2 years now, and he's still scored well over 200 points, not coming inside. If you get lots of touches wide, but then end up inside, that's brilliant. We only care about where you end up. But if Sterling, I don't know, for nothing else more than confidence, is playing in a position that feels better to him, he may well be getting in better positions for what we want for FPL. And so, yeah, I think it's entirely fair to say he has started this season brilliantly. He is looking a lot better than he did last season for Chelsea for a number of reasons. New manager, new system, maybe he's comfortable, whatever it is. And so while I don't necessarily think we're getting, was it like 18 goals, 15 assists from Man City back, we might be getting Chelsea's version of that at some point. And I think what we've seen so far verifies that enough. But we do need a lot more. The price is what means you can go there very, very easily. Like if he was priced at 9 million, like a Rashford or something, you'd want more, right?
Because what was his highest price at City? Did he get to about 12 mil at one point?
I think, I can't log in, but I think it was about 12.
I mean, he's 7 mil now, which is the difference. You're not paying even Sterling. What a year ago was 9 mil. Like you're not paying those premium prices anymore for him, and that's what makes the massive difference. Like even if you were to be quite bullish on him and say, no, I don't think that's what we're going to see this season. For 7 million, people can take that gamble, and it's absolutely fine. I am going to say though that I think that this is maybe a little bit of overreaction from, like you said, playing the easiest fixture he's going to have all year. And I do feel like people are kind of jumping on it quite quickly. I will say that this week, even if I was only on double Chelsea, I think I'd be moving in Mbeumo and Maddison before Sterling, personally. But I've got triple Chelsea, so
I thought you were going to say Sterling. Yeah, I'd probably be with you on that. Again, I have triple Chelsea. If I didn't, and I had 2 free transfers, maybe, you could do both.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm trying to make sure I don't want to bounce too far either way, right? I want to praise what he's done so far and, shout about how he's looking like a genuine option. But at the same time, we should take some caution with that. And we know in the FPL community, we can be susceptible to a bit of knee-jerkiness, bit of reactionary takes there. Looking 3 matches is all it is, but 0.5 XGI per 90 there just at the top. That's not spectacular. It's basically bang on what Odegaard, Martinelli and Saka all got last year. Now, they scored really, really well, But it was fine to swap them, to change them. Maybe Saka was the only one we didn't because of penalties all season. So Sterling maybe is getting to that level, which is not game breaking. It's just another midfielder who is, well, he's about 2 million under price, isn't he? That's the main thing. If he's
Yeah.
priced at 9 million, he's an Arsenal type midfielder based on 3 weeks of data. So take that with a heavy pinch of salt. But the idea is it should balance out what we're hearing on Match of the Day, what we're hearing, on podcasts or whatever, where he's looking brilliant, which I think he may well be. But we need end product. That's what we need in FPL.
Yeah. Right, moving on to the next man, which is Foden. And as you can see, actually, no, I'm not going to move on to Foden yet because I'm going to ask you, Sterling and Mbeumo Maddison, where does Sterling rank? Because you've put on Mbeumo
Oh,
Maddison.
third.
So he's
But
third.
I have Jackson, so that's gonna be flavoring my take. But I think there just isn't an alternative for Mbeumo. Like it's not like you need an alternative. You don't need another Brentford player.
Yeah.
It's Mbeumo, not Brentford. Maddison, Tottenham's fixtures are good, so maybe if Son had been playing well, maybe if Richarlison had been playing well, that would have been a really interesting conversation. The Jackson, Sterling, and Maddison, Richarlison would have been really interesting because you could have one of both and swap them around. But because Richarlison isn't really tempting anyone, I think you go Maddison, and therefore do you go Jackson? Because if those are just the two spots you've got available, like losing a Brighton midfielder and losing a Brighton striker, or losing an Arsenal midfielder, I think if you want a bit of both, you have to go that way around.
Yeah, no, I know. It's interesting. I agree with you. I would go Mbeumo, Maddison, Sterling at the moment in terms of, but I don't think that's not us two saying that we think Sterling is a bad move. It's just how we're thinking in terms of team setting up. We got Phil Foden next, which is also quite a divisive player. Lots of people jumped on him this week. He was playing, I can't remember. Oh, they were Sheffield United away. Now he ended up having gastroenteritis. I think he came out and said, which basically, he had a bit of a dodgy stomach, which is good, I think, because it means it wasn't a tactical decision.
It's good. You're happy that he got that.
Oh yeah, no,
you're putting that on. That's been recorded and put
really good. He got it. No, but it's good in terms of FPL because it wasn't a tactical decision. Like he basically, if he wasn't ill, he would have played, and that's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear, oh yeah, he actually, I don't fancy him in that game, whatever it is. I feel like this is the time for Foden to now start getting that more game time. You've got up here some heat maps between him and Alvarez.
Yeah. So when we were going through these, obviously I'd done a couple of players where it was like position this season, position last season. I thought that'd be very boring for all of these. I wanted to sort of look what was most relevant in our Foden conversation. And I think the question you're asking yourself, other than is he going to play, which is an entirely fair question for every City player. But if you've resolved that it was just illness this weekend and he is going to play 4 out of 5, which is about the best you can hope for if you're not Haaland or Edison, then the question you've got to ask yourself is it Foden over, say, for example, an Alvarez or over a Maddison and Mbeumo, Sterling, whatever, in terms of your squad? So we've addressed that first bit. So now I thought the next question to address would be Alvarez, because you probably have a City defender. If you don't, you're probably going to get one, and you definitely have Haaland. So you only have one spot. Alvarez and Foden are midfielder or forward and midfielder, respectively, in FPL. In real life, they are playing right next to each other in terms of the average position. So you can see here again from SofaScore, just so I can show the two maps next to each other. We have 47 on the left, which is Foden. This is just the match against Newcastle because they both started. So it's more relevant data than obviously the other matches where we aren't seeing the same sort of thing for the full length of the match. And then Alvarez on the right-hand side at number 19. In terms of their average position, they are literally next to each other. Foden slightly towards the right in terms of how Man City are orientated. But if we look then at their touch map around the pitch, Foden looks a lot more involved, firstly, to me. And secondly, is probably getting more touches further forward, slightly further central, but also further right and arguably a bit deeper. I think what that suggests is not necessarily, I want Foden because he's getting those touches high and central or whatever. He's just more involved. He's getting more touches. You can argue over who's replaced who in terms of the KDB role or the Gundogan role or whatever. I think realistically, it's not a case of them replacing them one for one. They're replacing the slot in the side and then obviously doing the job in the way that they're interpreting Pep's instructions. And we'll see that with Bernardo Silva in a minute.
Yeah.
But from this, I would say it's relatively inconclusive, especially if you think their minutes are similar. So the question then probably becomes, obviously, illness, but with Bernardo Silva as well. What happened when Foden on the next slide here came on for the last, was it like 5 minutes or something silly at the end.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was the one sub that City made, which made this graphic very,
And he
very
got
nice
an
because I could
assist.
just copy it over. Yeah, well, yeah, an assist, yeah,
An
miscontrolled
assist,
the
yeah.
ball. To be fair, he probably deserved much more from the previous match, so it's all
Yeah,
reasonable, isn't
true.
it? Like, got was it one assist in the last match, or was it one assist in
One
the last
assist,
match?
yeah. 9
One assist
points.
and three
He got
bonus,
3
yeah, because
bonus,
three
yeah.
bonus. And this match, he got an assist for miscontrolling it. But in the last match, he probably deserved about 3 assists.
Yeah,
So,
he did, yeah.
so fair enough. So again, we see Sheffield United here. The average positions. Oh, I think I've done them the wrong way around, haven't I? The badges should be the other way around. We have Newcastle, obviously, because I've just shown you that. My apologies, I've done the badges wrong way around. So the big one on the left-hand side is not Sheffield United, it is Newcastle. Obviously, we know that because we've just seen Foden and Alvarez right next to each other, sort of playing a very, very similar average position game, but a different game in terms of what they'll bring to the pitch, right? Foden more all over the place. Alvarez coming right, fewer touches, but as we'll see in a minute, maybe closer to Haaland when we look at the Newcastle match. So this is where Alvarez is doing this very much second striker, number 10, whatever you want to call it, that I think he's done more often in his City career when he's come into the team. He's very close to Haaland there in the graphic on the left, so the middle of these three. That is then Bernardo Silva, sort of further on the right, doing that if you want Foden role. But as I said, I'm not sure it's a one-to-one swap. It's more like the slot in the formation, but then they'll interpret it in the way that is most suited to them and Pep's instructions. The interesting bit is we see when Foden comes on, it's 5 minutes. So that is interesting data. 5 minutes where they're pushing as well against Sheffield United, not Newcastle. I'm so sorry about those badges. Foden is very, very high, very far right, basically very far right. He's he's very high. He's very right on the pitch there, kind of in line with Alvarez. So again, repeating what we saw against Newcastle, not Sheffield United on the left, but maybe a bit further forward as they're pushing. I think that if your squad has, let's say, obviously, if you've got Jackson and Haaland, I don't think you're going to 3 strikers. If you don't have Jackson or Jackson, sorry, you have Haaland, maybe you have Pedro and are looking to move on. If you have money, I wonder if Alvarez, just until that international break or the wild card or what have you, is an easier pick than Foden, because we've talked about all these other midfielders and we need to know about minutes. And with Bernardo Silva coming in here and obviously doing, basically the role that I think Foden would do here as well, not Alvarez. It's not like Alvarez went and played somewhere else on the pitch and Bernardo Silva came into that role. We can see here in the maps that it really is Bernardo coming in for Foden. And we know that Pep absolutely adores Bernardo. So whether Bernardo could replace Alvarez in the next match and then Foden could play as well in the sort of notional 10-8, whatever it is, and then Bernardo outright, maybe. But with Foden being ill, with Bernardo coming into that slot and Alvarez's role not really changing based on, a very, very brief interpretation of highlight stats and watching these maps here, I would say we need to be a little careful with his minutes. However, if it's the midfield slot that's available to you, Foden looks safer than he has done for about a year and is performing wonderfully. Anyway, I hope that made some sort of sense over what we're seeing between the two of them. And I think that's the question, right? Alvarez or Foden, rather than Foden in isolation, we need to know how to get that extra sort of City attacking spot in our side.
I think it can be Foden in isolation, though. If you've already got... I mean, there are people out there with Haaland, Watkins and Jackson, or they've got Archer, or they've got Wissa, whatever it is. And I feel like maybe they've got Martinelli and they just want to downgrade down to maybe a City midfielder. Their fixtures are lovely. We're expecting him to play. He's a great asset when he plays and when he gets the minutes. Last year, before Christmas, he was absolutely brilliant. And then obviously after Christmas, you went there.
I remember.
Obviously you then see that side of it as well. But the difference is this year, they just don't have that squad. They don't have what they had last year, do they? They don't have those players that can come in.
With Doku in as well now. So this is so when I say like in isolation, obviously FPL question, but also Pep question. So looking at the role that Bernardo has come in and played here, obviously he's played Foden because he's replaced him, because Foden was ill, we think. But we know Pep loves Bernardo. We know they've brought Doku in, who isn't going to be taking that Alvarez role, I wouldn't imagine.
No.
So do you think there's actually less opportunity, or less opportunity is the wrong way of putting it, there is more competition for Foden's spot and role, which I guess can be two different things in this team, versus Alvarez? While KDB is out, while there isn't someone who's going to necessarily play that sort of close off Haaland role, unless Foden's going to come into that, or unless who are they looking to sign? Maybe replace like a Gundogan type, they're Matheus Nunes, something like
Yeah.
that. Well, I'm not sure he's going to come in and do that. Even if they do sign him immediately, I wonder if Alvarez is slightly safer in terms of that Alvarez versus Foden, which will be a question Pep has to answer when Bernardo's fit, when Doku is up to speed.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because Doku's just a pure winger, isn't he? Like he plays on either wing, but he's a pure winger. But if you're having a look at this, like you said, obviously Foden kind of drifts out to that side anyway. But if Foden's starting to play centrally, I don't think Doku hurts. And it's whether he's looking at someone like Alvarez and saying, I would take you off, being right next to Haaland, and then bring on a Doku, still Grealish on the left and bring Doku on the right. And then he's got those kind of pure wingers to try and feed Haaland. And then keep Foden on to try and help those transitions and, sit just behind Haaland again, basically.
Yeah.
But it's all guesswork. That's the problem. And it's the one thing that's hurting Foden for me, looking at those midfielders I'm looking at bringing in, is that I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen every week. Whereas Maddison, he's 100% playing every week. And Mbeumo, 100% playing every week. And Sterling, there's no reason why he's not going to be playing every week. Whereas Foden, it's just, is his returns going to outweigh the fact that maybe he sometimes doesn't play? And is he sometimes not going to play? And also, is this the same City we've seen for years? Like, they don't seem to be that flowing attacking team that we've seen. They're getting the chances, and obviously Haaland's
Well, I mean,
still
their
getting goals.
numbers against Sheffield United were fine. I mean, obviously missed a penalty, which always, always helps. But
it's an interesting one. I mean, if we now look at it in a like kind of conclusion way, Foden for you, where does he rank? Considering the fixtures he's got coming up as well, and the fact it is City, probably one of the only teams left in the league that can blow teams completely out of the water now. How are you looking at him in terms of ranking him with those midfielders? Is he close to coming into your team at all?
So I'd be lying if I said one of the reasons I didn't end up going Sterling and went Jackson was because I keep that Foden spot available for Havertz. Could be a number of other players. If you're wildcarding, you can obviously construct your team however you like, and that's where I wonder if you sort of think about the Alvarez versus Foden thing. Mm-hmm. Let's assume you have a defender and a striker, which I think is sensible. You obviously don't have to have either. You can quite happily go without. I think the thing that's always tempting with City is that per 90, their numbers will be outrageous. Their points per 90 will be outrageous.
It's like Mahrez, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but Foden might end up scoring exactly the same as Sterling, or like 50 points less, but have better numbers per 90. But you need the 90s for those numbers to mean anything for FPL, right? And that's where, what we've tried to, I think, go through here is I don't think we're trying to draw a safe conclusion here because I don't think there is one. But with the things we've looked at here, it's basically how are Alvarez and Foden interacting? Do they both have a spot in the team? Do they both have an important spot in the team in terms of FPL? How will Bernardo affect that? And I do think it's worth thinking that Bernardo so very often plays for Pep and is so very often very important, but he can play a number of roles, so he doesn't have to take either of their spots. But there's every chance he does, especially if we know Rodri's nailed, obviously, and then we'll see what, if Kovacic is now taking that sort of middle of those midfielders, then there's only one left, which either Foden or Alvarez are going to have to cede to Bernardo if, say, for example, a Doku started taking the right wing spot. He is, I think we talked about this last week, a dribbly boy, as people like to say. He's very, very good at progressing ball at feet, probably similar to like how Grealish has been in the past before Pep changed him into a slightly different player in terms of controlling possession. Maybe that's what they want to do with Doku, but I think he's probably replacing what Mahrez brought. So you know how Pep will have plans for certain matches, and I think we probably mention this every time we talk about City, but please go follow Luke. Dis_Luke or something on Twitter. But yeah, please go follow Luke. Listen to him on Inspected Goals when he talks about City, because he knows it better than anyone. The two big things I think we can take away from what Luke often says is that Pep, while he doesn't pick on form necessarily, he does enjoy rhythm and he will reward players for doing well with keeping spots in the team. So if, for example, Foden's playing brilliantly, there's every chance he may keep it. But what always overrides that is Pep will have a plan for every opposition. So something we saw a lot last year is those low blocks. So like Nottingham Forest, he would basically play Haaland and Alvarez up top together, and that would take a spot away from someone else like a Foden. With Doku now coming in, we would see matches where Mahrez would start. Whether Pep wanted a certain amount of control over a match. He's spoken about how Grealish brings that to him an awful lot. And if he wants it on the other side, he may have played Mahrez more or less, depending on what he wants out of the team in that situation. And that was often Foden's problem. It was often Mahrez that brought the tactical thing that Pep wanted. Going forward this year, Foden obviously could play a different role, but I think then the question becomes, how is Pep going to use Doku? Let's assume he uses Bernardo when he can. And how is that going to affect these two? And I think a very long-winded way of, I guess, coming back to the point I made earlier, is I think while Foden it could be brilliant for FPL, while KDB is out, I think Alvarez is gonna see more minutes. And so, per minute Foden, but maybe more minutes Alvarez.
Yeah. So while we finish off then on these midfielders, before we look at our teams, if you were on wildcard now, who are your 5 midfielders?
Salah, Diaz. No. To be fair, I'd be tempted to
Stop
try and
it.
make a Salah team. Is it? I think again, the wildcard 8 is when you probably drop Haaland, go
No, no,
Salah,
no,
and
no,
then
no, no,
hide
no.
behind a big
Now.
sofa. Now. Keep in mind task. So you have Bruno,
Yeah.
you have Mbeumo,
Yeah.
you have Saka, if we think he keeps penalties. So
Mm-hmm.
that's 3. Then you've got 2 spots. Mine are currently Rashford. It's tempting to drop Rashford, if only to try and find something else elsewhere. But I think you keep Rashford. You're going to be there anyway, so it'd just be fixtures. So that just leaves us 1 spot, which is basically the same question we've been answering anyway. And so I'm going to give it to. So the one player we've not talked about in this detail is Eze. It's between Maddison and Eze. I'll give it to Maddison. But
Interesting.
I like Eze an awful lot. An
I know,
awful lot.
I know a lot of people as well will be asking why we haven't discussed Diaby. I really, really like Diaby, but in a couple of weeks.
Yep, that's the same as
Couple of
Newcastle.
weeks.
So I very nearly on the big list we put up.
Yeah.
Diaby's on there. So is Leon Bailey. He actually has better numbers per 90,
Yeah.
but that doesn't matter if minutes or a thing. Diaby looks brilliant. I think Watkins, yeah, he lost penalties, which we know is a slight dent to his FPL potential, but looked brilliant again the other day. Probably should have scored if it weren't for a wonderful save from Trafford. I think is it 6, something like that their fixtures are better off the top of my head. So the wild card in 8 that we're all probably going to do is when you start getting Villa and Newcastle. That's a big reason for wild carding around then. Maybe you lose City or at least lose some other City options. So this conversation brings us back to this conversation. If you're looking at City, Alvarez, Foden, whoever, you may only be looking for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe that could give you more confidence than say a Foden, because I'd be surprised if like Doku comes in and is first choice in that time. So yeah, fair enough. If actually that's a nice way to wrap this up. Sorry that I've taken so long to come to it. If the conversation I was trying to make the point of like minutes versus per 90, if Foden is the per 90 winner, which I think he is, you can probably give him enough minutes in the next 4 weeks to make him a better option than Alvarez, even though you're gambling a bit. Then you wildcard, and what you do is you wildcard into like Liverpool, Newcastle, Villa. I think Newcastle defense, Aston Villa midfield, and Watkins. Maybe someone keeps a Matty Cash as well, and then maybe you're going for like a Salah, a Diaz, something like that in Liverpool.
Basically, what you're doing is you're planning out our agenda for the Gameweek 8 Scoutcast, aren't you?
Well, yeah, and that never goes wrong doing it 4 weeks
No, be
ahead,
fine.
right? They couldn't
Be
possibly. Maybe Reece James will be fit
absolutely
again, mate.
fine.
I'm wildcarding back into Reece James. I am as
Right.
well if he's fit.
Let's have a look at our teams then. So this is my team at the moment. This is my bus team. I got Pickford in goal. Oh, I got Pickford in goal. I got double Chelsea defence with Chilwell and Colwill. I got Estupinan. I got Martinelli, Rashford, Mitoma, Saka, Bruno Fernandes, Nicholas Jackson, Haaland, Saliba on the bench because they're playing at home and they don't keep clean sheets at home apparently. Luke Shaw, who's injured. Osula, who has now lost his place to Archie, you would have assumed, and then Turner on the bench as well. I've got 2 free transfers with 0 in the bank. Initially, I was thinking Martinelli to Mbeumo and Shaw to a City defender. And then I was planning the next few weeks, and I was thinking, I've got so many issues in defence in terms of who am I going to play every week. And it just felt like I was getting rid of Shaw to bring in a City defender where I'm going to want to play them every week, which means I've got to bench one of Colwill, Saliba and Estupinan every week. And it just seemed like a headache. So I'm just going to keep Shaw this week because it's those midfielders I want. So I think I'm going to be getting rid of Mitoma and Martinelli. This is at the moment for Maddison and Mbeumo. That's the 2 moves I'm thinking of making. And I'll keep Shaw for another week. And then next week, as long as nothing goes wrong, I'll move Shaw to Anu Doggy or Botman if he's okay. It sounds like he might not be. Or a Villa defender, because I feel like then I'm just going to keep them on my bench and then unleash them in game week 7, 8, 9 if I don't wildcard, whatever happens then. So, yeah, I feel like that's the moves I'm going to make. Mitoma, Martinelli to Maddison and Mbeumo. I feel like then I've got the midfield that, I love. I could easily get rid of Rashford if I wanted to in a couple of weeks' time. But I feel pretty happy with that, to be honest, Seb.
Do you think there's value in using one transfer and continuing to roll another?
I did think about that because of the international break. I won't lie. And it felt nice maybe having those 2 weeks. It's just the fact I want Mbeumo. And I feel like if I were to only do one, it would be Martinelli to Mbeumo. But I just feel like I said before, with Maddison and those kind of streaks, I just feel like you need to get on him as soon as you can. And I feel like even away to Burnley, it isn't the nicest of fixtures, but I still feel like he can get a return. Mitoma home to Newcastle, probably could. We've seen Newcastle aren't as strong as maybe we're wanting them to be. But this was my plan to jump off of Mitoma after game week 3, and it was to try and get Maddison. And I feel like I just kind of want him now. But yeah, that could be an option. It could be that I only do one. And having 2 after the international break's nice. But yeah, I do fancy those moves, so we'll see what happens. Moving on to your team, Seb, talk us through it. Oh, look at this.
So I'm not playing FPL next week because I couldn't get into my account. It'd be funny if I log in and I'm like on a minus 1008 or something. Yeah.
Oh no.
That'd be the easy way out.
Applications for Scoutcast presenters in the post,
that'd
please.
be jokes. Yeah. So I guess jump back to my points, I guess, and we can just sort of talk through that. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Sweet, thank you.
There you go.
So João Pedro would be a decent enough start, but this is the week that if all had gone to plan, basically, which means, Reece James had still been fit, I'd have an extra transfer. So I'd probably be losing João Pedro as per was the plan, and either losing Estupiñán or benching. I would have wanted to add 1.5 in the bank, I think, to start the season, which would have done me Gabriel or Estupiñán up to a Trippier, although maybe in a couple of weeks. So the plan has had to be adjusted a bit from that. I've obviously gone Jackson now. So I have very little money in the bank now, but quite a heavy bench in Baldock, who was back fit, Gabriel and João Pedro. The team, as from last week, and we'll see how it ends up lining up, is Edison, Chilwell, Gusto, Estupiñán, Rashford, Saka, Bruno, Havertz, Mbeumo, Jackson, and Haaland. So I am probably looking at either losing Gabriel and bringing in a defender, or carrying Gabriel for another week. Not necessarily, because I believe he'll start. We'll see. If Zinchenko starts, I still kind of think he might start, but I'm definitely losing confidence in that, if only because Zinchenko hasn't started. And I imagine he's fit now, so I don't know if Arteta just prefers the inversion from the right, and therefore the Zinchenko-Gabriel theory will just never get tested, let alone proven. But for FPL, I think I have a more important spot to fix, which is Havertz. We saw, if people want to jump back at any point, on the big list of midfielders, he was better than Martinelli, actually, so far in 3 weeks of numbers. But really, where that's come from is he's kind of just put up little bits here and there. I think he had one decent chance. It's not like at any point you've gone, oh, he must have scored, or he had one match where he got loads and loads of chances or something like that. He's got all right numbers, but they've come in little bits and stuff, which obviously maybe is going to indicate that he's not going to be hugely involved going forward, or at least it might take time for him to bring what at least I thought he might bring from that 8 sort of advanced 8 position. And with those first 3 fixtures now out of the way, I think it's viable to look to move on anyway. So that is probably the spot I'm looking at, and thus the conversation tonight on midfielders. So I do have Mbeumo. There's every chance I go Maddison. I really like the look of Eze. We didn't go into him in detail tonight, but his numbers are brilliant. He's on penalties. He's on set pieces. Palace's fixtures are improving, and he's cheaper, which for me, I've just gone and spent most of my money on doing Mbeumo up to Jackson, so I have very little left now. If I want Newcastle defence out of the team I've got here, and I don't want it just to be Botman, I do need to find some money from someone. It wouldn't be enough just to drop João Pedro down $1 million. I'd probably need a little bit more because of price changes, just a little bit more. So I'm tempted by that. The other thing I'm tempted by, again, because of squad construction, is Foden. But I think what I'd rather end up with is João Pedro becoming Alvarez in that situation and me finding funds elsewhere. Havertz down to Eze and then wildcarding into Newcastle a couple of weeks late might be worth it. One thing I should just throw in on the City stuff as well, though, is because we mentioned per 90 so much. So just wanted to very quickly, some of the numbers from only just so far this season. Last season, I think Foden did come out on top. But so far, Alvarez is just beating Foden per 90 by about like 0.1 so far per 90. So when I'm saying, oh, Foden is better per minute, but Alvarez gets the minutes, that is incorrect so far this season. But I believe longer term, that is what we might see. Yeah. And to round this off, why don't I, because we don't have Flappy tonight, but why don't I just very quickly explain what he's
Oh,
done.
yeah. Go on then.
Maybe.
It's got to be quick, though, because we've still got a bit to do.
So he's done Sterling. He did Sterling straight away after the match. Massive knee jerk. He's a foolish man.
So
No, he's
disappointed.
not. No. He did. He's not here to defend himself. So I want to just very quickly. He mentioned that he's got four mids like both of us from Arsenal and Man United. He doesn't want so much investment into that match, so he had to get rid of one of those spots. Therefore, it's a midfielder he's looking at. Watching Chelsea, he just loves what he's seen so far, looking like the Sterling of old. Which obviously I think there's an emotional connection here, but that's very valid. Rich had Sterling in the past for Man City in some very, very good spots and did very, very well out of it. Likewise, he says, like a mug, he's still carrying João Pedro, and he doesn't want, say, for example, the reason he went early, the staving he's gone to get Sterling to become like zero point 0.6 or zero point 0.8 as opposed to like a full 1 million. So he wanted to get as much money he can into the bank to like solve problems like João Pedro. He has Archer, who he thinks will become an option for him if he needs, if minutes are a worry for someone going forward. So I think the reasons he's done it make sense. For me and you, though, I think we were both like, you've done this because it's a great move, but you've done it now as opposed to waiting the week because you just wanna sate that thing in your head, which I think is entirely valid. But they've got Carabao Cup midweek. I would be a little nervous, just a little nervous. But he wanted the 0.1, and that's a big reason he did it.
Yeah, and he's done it, and it could work out, but it just seems so risky to me. Mark's done it as well. Mark Southern's done it. There's plenty
Already?
of people. Yeah, there's people in the community that have done it. I think Hibbo's done it as well. So there are people that have done it. If it works, brilliant. I don't know. I just don't have the guts for that. I'm not going to lie. Right, moving on.
The move this one is Bowen, isn't it? If you actually want Sterling as a Luton, get Bowen.
Yeah, exactly. Community team only 50 points this week. What's going on? What's going on, guys? I thought you were giving it the big one before the season, weren't you? Yeah. All going downhill now. Look at that. Look. Onana in goal.
No Bruno, mate.
Should have got Pickford. Onana in goal. Chilwell, Ruben, Estupinan, Rashford, Matoma, Martinelli, Saka, Maddison. Great shout on him, though. Watkins and Haaland captain. They had quite a few fires to put out. And I think they're in okay shape. But only 50 points this week. So they've fallen back a little bit. I'm not going to lie, Seb. We're not going to be wearing masks on the first stream back. We're not. We're not. They started well, and I reckon there's trouble in paradise in that group chat now. I reckon they're going to pot, honestly. But I should say happy birthday to the guy that's organising all this for us, Rank Chaser. Thank you so much, and a happy birthday. I think it's his birthday tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday.
Right, we're going to finish off. Look at this graphic. Woohoo! So over and unders now this week. So I've got 6 players here. Most of them are midfielders. In fact, all of them are. No, most of them are. One of them isn't. I'm going to go. We've only got you, Seb, so we're going to do this really, really quickly. Over and unders for all these players. FPL Feral made this graphic. He is absolute legend, and the graphic is just awesome. So make sure you give us a like if you like this as well, and give him a drop as well, and just say this is awesome. So Sterling we've got. So this is for their next 3 weeks. So from game week 4 to 6. Do you think Sterling is going to get over or under 18.5 points? He's got Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, Aston Villa at home. 18.5 points. Is that reasonable for the next 4 to 6 weeks, over or under?
Right. So the reason we were late tonight and the reason I've not looked at this yet is because I was doing that final Foden versus Alvarez thing graphic that we talked about. So I hope that was worth it because I'm going to purely vibe this. Yes. Sterling got 19 points in one match, mate. So he's on for 19 just against Forest, right? 18.5. Terrible shout.
So you're going over.
Massively over. Triple it.
Nice. Next one is Martinelli. So he's got Man United at home, Everton away, and then Tottenham at home. 14.5 points I've got for him for those 3 game weeks. What do you think? Over or under?
Under.
Under, yeah, I go under as well. Considerably. Maddison's up next. He's got Burnley away, Sheffield United at home, and then Arsenal away. 16.5 points here for him. Are you going over or under?
Actually trying to think about this one because I might get him. So if he gets an assist, 3, turning up to 5, maybe 6 with a clean sheet, get a couple of bonus if he gets an assist, probably just because he's so involved, Bruno Fernandes-esque. So you could call an assist like an 8-pointer, give or take. Does that twice, still under by 0.5. So he either needs to double return in one of those matches or do something against Arsenal. Obviously he'll have the 2 appearance points, so I would say just edge it over.
Yeah, nice. I thought that was a close one, that one.
I've
gone more for Foden. So Foden's up next. He's got Fulham at home, West Ham away, Nottingham Forest at home. Those fixtures. I've got him 17.5 points for him. Are you going over or under?
It's minutes, isn't it, man? Fulham at home, probably
Should be
fine,
big.
you would think. I mean, that's the thing. Any one of these matches, he gets them all in one match, Sterling style, doesn't he? But I will go. I will go over. Let's say it was just illness. He's fine. He's nailed under Pep. Doku isn't coming in yet to steal his team. It'll be Bernardo. That's the thing, man. It'll be Bernardo only in one of those matches because he won't need that level of control against Fulham and Forest at home. So Foden plays and smashes it.
Yeah. Hopefully in one game because he won't play the other two. Rashford, Rashford up next. He's got Arsenal away, Brighton at home, Burnley away. I've given him 18.5. What do you think, over or under?
And Man United have finished.
Typical Leeds fan. And then the last one, interesting one here. Saliba I've
Oh,
gone for.
nice.
Man United at home, Everton away, Spurs at home. Clean sheets don't seem to happen for Arsenal at home.
No, they don't, weirdly.
I've gone for 11.5 points. What do you think?
Yeah, so if he
Over or
keeps clean
under?
sheet, obviously 6, and then could get a couple of bonus. So if he got like every time they keep clean sheets, say he gets one bonus, so 7, it's 14. Need 2 clean sheets. Man United home, Tottenham home, Everton away. Might be 1 clean sheet there. I think he needs another return, so under.
Oh, under 11.5.
It's tough.
It's tough. Yeah, it really is tough. Lovely stuff. And again, thank you so much, Farrell. I love the graphic. It's awesome. He's going to do that every week for us. So he's an absolute legend. Right. Q&A now. I reckon we've got... I will stay on this screen because the intro screen doesn't have the mics.
Awesome.
Zubin says, do I sell Rashford or Eze? I need to get in either Mbeumo, Foden or Sterling.
Repeat that again. Sorry, I was just reading chat, making sure it
Do I
was okay.
sell Rashford or Eze? I need to get in either Mbeumo, Foden or Sterling.
Do not sell Eze. Do not sell Eze.
Yeah,
So I guess Rashford.
cool. Ron Manager, if you had to choose one of Rodri, Sterling, Gordon or Bowen, who would you go for the next 4 game weeks?
So Rodri and Gordon are out. So it's just Sterling or Bowen. Sterling.
Yeah, Bowen's got tricky fixtures as well. Mahomey says, what do you think of Lewis Hall as an option?
No.
I'm
He's not.
assuming because Botman might be out, so Burns going to potentially play centre-back.
Yeah, but I don't know. So
They've got
what?
Livramento as well, haven't they? Oh, no,
Yeah.
he's on the right, sorry.
Yeah, I think we talked, didn't we? That Trippier can play left, but obviously you'd keep him right just because that's where he's so productive for them. I think so. I guess if you're wildcarding in a couple of weeks, maybe I don't know the extent of injuries, and I don't know the certainty of that being the way that that Newcastle would change to accommodate it either. But the one thing like that is if you're going to make a move where you know you might have to reverse it or bench the player when a first choice player comes back fit, you need to know that you're going to get a real good return on your investment in that period. And excuse me, I just hit the mic. And then and also you need to know you can get out of it at the other end. And I think that would be just one ask too many. So I think there must be other things you can do in your squad than bring in Hall.
Yeah. Damien Broyne says, Onana replacement options, please.
Anyone? A goalkeeper. Um, uh,
I'm
I
shaking my head
rated
for the
I
pod,
rated
by the way.
Johnston before the season to no Palace, but we'll see what happens to Dean Henderson there.
Hmm.
So I like Palace's defense an awful lot over all of last season. They were fourth, I want to say, or fifth, for expected goals against, fourth or fifth best. So that's encouraging over a whole season. Obviously, we need to play the fixtures. Johnston is nice and cheap, but if Dean Henderson comes in, that could be a bit of a problem. Flecken, very easy, just Brentford again, very easy option. And Edison, man, just I've gone Edison, so of course I'm biased towards that, but it's just the easiest way into the best defense in the league by a mile.
Terrible.
In a few weeks, Pope.
Flecken for me, and Areola as well, 4 mil.
That's a good shout. Areola and Turner would be a
Doing
fun combination.
Yeah, really would.
Wildcard combination that. Game week 8, see how that looks.
FPL Ron Frost, brilliant data, Ron Frost, by the way. Give him a follow. He's a really, really good follow. Says, do I start Archer in game week 4? And it's got to be quick now, Seb.
No.
Got like a minute. No. Yeah, I say no. It's starting to happen. I don't see it yet. Ryan Todd says, start 2 out of these 3. Trippier, Estupinan, Udogi. So basically, which one would you bench?
Trippier and Udogi. So Estupinan.
So you bench Estupinan. Yeah. Only good things happen when you bench Estupinan.
That's the assumption that if Udogi doesn't get 90, he gets 0.
Yeah. Gavin Dolan says, what are your thoughts on hits at the moment?
If you're in big trouble, like injuries and you can't field a team, by all means take one. But generally, I think the best advice is you should be more hesitant to take hits than we generally are in the FPL scape. We're sometimes a bit too keen to take them. They're mostly for doubles and for getting yourself out of holes. They're not for like chasing Sterling or something like that. Yeah. In my opinion.
Yeah, especially if you're getting rid of a player that's going to play as well. That's always a hard hit to justify. Sigurd says, do I go Gavardio or Ruben Diaz?
Ruben Diaz is nailed in terms of outfield City players as much as they can be, but assuming there's a bit of a price issue there, I think Vardiel could be decent, man. I nearly started the season with him, until I found out he wasn't starting.
Yeah, Flapjack's in the chat, by the way. He told us he wasn't here today, so I don't know what he's doing in the chat.
That's superstitious, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, he hasn't realised David Monday's in the chat as well, so he's not getting paid this month. And last one, is this from FPL Dream, do I do Pedro to Alvarez, or do I just roll?
I would do that if you're having to play that player. Yeah. Otherwise, roll. If it's a benching thing, roll because you've got a good 11.
Yeah, lovely. Right. Thank you so much for the people that are in the chat this week. Like I said, we tapped out about 1,000 people, so thank you so much for joining us. We will be here again next week, and we will have the more handsome Flapjack with us as well. Obviously, thank you so much for putting up with us too. Seb, I hope you enjoyed your evening.
I really did. Yeah, we stumbled through. I think that was okay. Thank you so much for making it okay, my friend.
I've realised that Flappy's the glue. I think Rich is the glue that keeps us both together. And like I said, obviously enjoy this week. We've got midweek games. So in my opinion, don't make any transfers early because information is key. So you never know. It doesn't have to be the person you're bringing in that gets injured that's the problem. It's any other person in your team that might get injured that means that you maybe have to make a move. So just hold it. It's okay.
You've missed the price rise now, so genuinely wait now.
Exactly. But yes, thank you so much, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.